The moment a narcissist sees you have changed forever, your silence is louder than your pain. There's a silence that doesn't come from weakness. It doesn't come from surrender. It comes from strength, from awakening, from the moment you realize that reacting is giving away your power, that every scream, every reply, every attempt to reason with someone who feeds on your emotional chaos, it only serves them, not you, and so you go quiet. Not because you have nothing to say, but because your peace has finally become more valuable than your participation in their circus. That silence hits like an earthquake to the narcissist. It's not peaceful, it's not passive, it's terrifying because they know what it means. It means you're no longer feeding their ego. It means they no longer control your emotions. It means you're evolving and they're being left behind in the dust of their own toxicity. Your silence is their mirror, reflecting their emptiness back at them. Before this moment, they trained you to believe that if you didn't speak, if you didn't defend yourself, if you didn't explain yourself, you were weak. But now you see it, now you feel it. Silence is strength when it comes from clarity. You don't need to prove anything to anyone who's already decided to misunderstand you. You don't need to beg for dignity from someone who's committed to disrespecting you. They thrived on your reactions. Every emotional outburst, every cry for understanding, every plea for decency, those were fuel to them. It reassured them that they still mattered in your mind, that they still had access to your inner world. But now the engine is cut off. The gas station is closed. You are no longer a source of supply. You are a locked door, and they don't have the key anymore. There's a sacred power that comes when you stop responding, when you stop justifying, when you stop being available to emotional provocation. It's not coldness, it's wisdom, because now you've learned that someone who manipulates your words doesn't deserve to hear your voice. Someone who twists your truth doesn't deserve access to it, and someone who causes your pain doesn't deserve a front row seat to your healing. The narcissist is confused by this new you. They're used to the chaos dance, the back and forth, the push, pull, but now it's just silence, stillness, and they can't handle that. Because the absence of your reaction is the evidence of your growth. It's the confirmation that their tactics have expired. You are no longer living in the arena of their madness. You've left the building and took your soul with you. Let them wonder. Let them replay the last conversation. Let them create imaginary narratives to make themselves feel important. That's not your concern anymore. You're not trying to correct their version of the story. You're not here to be understood by someone who deliberately chose to misunderstand you. You've got better things to do, like rebuilding your life, like remembering who you are. There's a new soundtrack playing in your life now, and it's the sound of boundaries being respected, peace being prioritized, self-love being resurrected. That silence they hear, it's the sound of you rising. You're not hiding, you're healing, and healing doesn't require an audience. It requires intention, solitude, courage, and that's exactly what you've tapped into. What they don't realize is that silence is not the absence of energy, it's the concentration of it. Every moment you don't react, you're redirecting energy back into yourself, into your purpose, into your vision, into your freedom. That silence is you recharging, reclaiming, rebuilding. And one day, when they look back and realize how loud your silence was, it'll be too late to do anything about it. They used to control the temperature of your emotional climate. One word and you'd boil. One cold look and you'd freeze. But now, you're regulating your own internal weather. You decide when it rains. You decide when the sun shines, and their influence, it doesn't even register anymore. You've broken free from the emotional thermostat they tried to program you with. Let them rage. Let them provoke. Let them try the same old tricks. You're not the same person anymore. You've changed your default setting from reaction to reflection, from chaos to calm, from desperate to divine. And the narcissist cannot comprehend this version of you, because this version doesn't play the game. This version writes the rules. They will test you. Oh yes, they will. They'll poke, prod, bait, guilt trip, love, bomb, gaslight. But every test they throw your way is just another reminder of who you used to be and how far you've come. You don't need to pass those tests anymore. You already graduated, and your diploma is silence, framed in inner peace, mounted in a place they'll never reach again. There's no revenge in your silence, No hidden strategy to win them back. It's not about hurting them. It's about healing you. You don't want power over them. You want power over your own life, and that starts with not giving energy to someone who only ever used it to hurt you. That's the kind of power that doesn't shout, it echoes. Your silence is no longer a placeholder. It's a declaration, a line in the sand, a new chapter, a rebirth. And though they may never admit it, Narcissist feels it in their bones. Something has shifted, something irreversible. You're not the same. You've risen, you've awakened, and no matter how many masks they wear, they can't unsee it. They know it. That silence is your crown. Wear it, guard it, protect it with everything you've got. Because it represents the moment you chose yourself over them, peace over pain, growth over games, and that silence, that unshakable, divine, healing silence, that is the sound of a soul finally free. You set boundaries, and mean them. There was a time when the word no felt foreign in your mouth. You feared it would push people away, make them hate you, make you unlovable, so you softened your no into a maybe. You stretched your soul thin trying to be accepted. You were trained, sometimes by trauma, to believe that love meant self-sacrifice, that love meant saying yes even when your whole being was screaming no, but not anymore. You've changed the rules. You've drawn the line, and this time the line isn't in pencil. It's carved in stone. Boundaries aren't walls to keep love out. They're walls to keep toxicity out. And for the first time in your life, you realize that boundaries are how you love yourself. They're how you protect your time, your energy, your peace. And when you enforce those boundaries, not just speak them but mean them, the narcissist feels it like a slap across their illusion of control. Because now you're not just talking about change, you've become it. They used to cross your lines with a smirk because you never held the line. You forgave the unforgivable. You explained the obvious. You accepted the unacceptable. But something happened. You woke up. You realized that self-love without boundaries is just self-sabotage in disguise. So you stopped making excuses for their behavior and you started making decisions for your freedom. The narcissist sees the shift when you say no without explaining it. When you say, I don't accept that, and walk away. When you block their number, not in anger, but in alignment with your new standards. You used to negotiate with your own spirit to make them comfortable. Now you're making your peace the priority, and their comfort is no longer your responsibility. They hate it because they're not used to resistance. They've always counted on your empathy to override your logic. They've always weaponized your kindness, your guilt, your fear of abandonment. But now your empathy is guarded by discernment. Now your kindness has a backbone. You still love deeply, but you no longer bleed for people who cut you on purpose. They'll test the boundary, they always do. They'll come back with flattery or with fury. They'll swing between guilt and gaslight. You've changed, they'll say, and they're right. You have, and it's not a phase. It's a new foundation. You're not just protecting your space, you're honoring your soul. And nothing terrifies a narcissist more than someone who's no longer emotionally available for their dysfunction. You don't need to yell your boundary. You don't need to broadcast it. You just live it, consistently, quietly, firmly. And that calm consistency is what unravels the narcissist. Because they can't manipulate what they can't move. And you now are immovable. You are no longer negotiating your worth on someone else's emotional stock market. The narcissist used to think they owned a piece of your soul. Every time you gave in, every time you gave them one more chance, they felt entitled to your forgiveness. They thought your love was a leash. But the leash is gone. You've cut the cord, and your no isn't just a word. It's a mirror. It shows them what they no longer control. Your new boundaries don't just protect you. They teach you. Every time you enforce one, you remind yourself who you are now. You're someone who values your energy. Someone who doesn't entertain emotional beggars, someone who doesn't explain their standards to people who never intended to meet them. This is a new identity, a higher frequency, a new way of existing. They can't reach you the way they used to. The old hooks don't work. The old patterns bounce off your new energy because your boundary isn't just physical, it's energetic. You walk into rooms differently. You carry yourself differently. You're no longer trying to avoid conflict. You're willing to lose anyone who demands you betray yourself to keep them. It's not easy. Setting boundaries shake up everything that was built on your silence, but you've learned that discomfort is the down payment for freedom, and the pain of being misunderstood is far less than the pain of being mistreated. You're willing to be the bad guy in their story if it means being the hero in your own. They might say you're selfish, let them. They might say you've changed, let them. What they call selfish, you now call self-respect. What they call difficult, you now call discipline, because when you set a boundary, you're not being cruel, you're being clear, and clarity is the most loving thing you can ever give to yourself. This version of you doesn't chase, doesn't convince, doesn't beg. This version of you sits in the truth and lets the truth do the talking. You don't lower your standards to keep people. You raise your standards to see who's meant to rise with you. And the narcissist, they won't rise, they'll rage, but that's no longer your problem to solve. You're done explaining your boundaries to people who benefited from your lack of them. You're done walking on eggshells for people who should have been walking in gratitude. And you're done folding yourself into a shape that fits their narrative. You are no longer available for manipulation disguised as love. You're only available for truth, for peace, and for healing. This is your line in the sand, not drawn in fear, but in faith. Faith in your worth, faith in your growth, faith in the future that requires you to protect your peace like your life depends on it, because it does. And this time you're not backing down. This time your no is backed by years of being taken for granted. And this time your boundary isn't just heard, it's felt, and it echoes through everything you touch. You stop seeking their approval. The greatest prison you ever lived in was built from the bricks of someone else's opinion. For years, you handed your worth to someone who never saw your value. You kept adjusting yourself like a chameleon in their storm, hoping, just hoping, that this time they'd finally see you, validate you, choose you. But that version of you is gone, because there comes a moment, one powerful soul-defining moment, when you stop begging for crumbs from a person who feasts off your insecurity. You used to shrink yourself to make room for their ego. You silenced your voice to avoid their wrath. You made happiness dependent on their temporary affection. You twisted yourself into emotional origami, hoping to be small enough, quiet enough, pleasing enough, just so they'd approve of you. And what did it get you? Exhausted, hollow, invisible. That was the cost of their approval, your identity. And now you've canceled that subscription. When a narcissist realizes you no longer care what they think, it rattles their core. Their control was never built on chains. It was built on your need for them to like you. That was the fuel for their manipulation. But the second you stop needing it, the second you realize you were whole all along, the entire game falls apart. They don't know how to manipulate someone who doesn't need their praise. They once had you chasing validation like a drug's. Small doses here and there, just enough to keep you hooked. A compliment followed by a cruel insult. I love you, buried in silence. It was intentional. It was never love. It was control. But now you're off the emotional roller coaster. You've grounded yourself in your truth, and it terrifies them because now their opinion holds zero currency in your kingdom. They don't get it. How someone who once lived for their approval is suddenly walking away without explanation. But here's the truth. You no longer explain yourself to people who deliberately misinterpret your growth as rebellion. You're not rebelling. You're reclaiming. You're not rude. You're real. And if the real you offends them, that's not your burden anymore. You've traded approval for authenticity, and it's the most liberating exchange you've ever made. Because once you stop performing for their applause, you start living for your purpose, and your purpose doesn't require their permission. You're no longer shrinking. Someone who finds your wholeness threatening. You're expanding, you're glowing, you're alive. This new you. You no longer check your phone every 2 seconds hoping for a message. You no longer read between the lines of every word they say. You no longer dress your decisions in fear, hoping that not in approval. You make decisions based on your values, your healing, your truth. And if they don't approve, so be it. You no longer hand out emotional control like candy. You've become dangerous to them, not because you're aggressive, but because you're unshakably centered. You don't need their flattery to feel good. You don't need their acceptance to feel valid. You've tapped into something far more powerful, self-respect, and that's something no narcissist can give you, or take from you. They'll try to rehook you, watch. They'll act like they're finally impressed by you. They'll mirror your growth and pretend to support it, but you see through it now. You don't need their praise because you've recognized the price tag on it. You know it comes with strings attached, and now you only accept love that's free of manipulation, free of control, free of performance. What once felt like rejection now feels like redirection. You're no longer obsessed with winning them over. You've learned that not every no is a loss. Sometimes it's the universe clearing the stage for your real life to begin. And that is the moment everything changes. That is the moment you change, when you stop performing and start living, when you stop pleasing and start rising. They'll say you've become full of yourself. Good, be full of yourself. You've spent too long being emptied by them. Let them talk, let them criticize, let them whisper, because none of that touches you anymore. You've outgrown the cage, and their opinion no longer has the power to bend your back or silence your roar. You are not here to be liked. You are here to live fully, to rise boldly, to shine unapologetically. You're here to heal the generational lies that said your worth depended on someone else's opinion, and you're doing it, not by fighting them, but by walking away with your head high and your soul intact. No more dressing your truth in shame. No more seeking approval from people who couldn't even approve of themselves. You are not their mirror anymore. You've shattered that illusion. You've built your own identity, one rooted in your values, your faith, your strength, and that is the ultimate freedom, not needing anyone to cosign your worth. They don't get to grade your value anymore. They don't get to sit in judgment over your healing. They don't get to decide when you're enough. You've already decided, and that decision, that's final, not because you hate them, but because you finally love you. You don't react to their triggers anymore. They used to know exactly which buttons to press. Like a seasoned puppeteer, they could pull your strings and get a reaction every single time. A sigh, a scream, a tear, a desperate text message, an emotional breakdown. They lived for it because your reaction was their reward. It told them they still had access to your soul, but now you've cut the strings, you've shut the show down, you've stopped dancing to their chaos. You no longer flinch at their silence. You don't lose sleep over their accusations. You don't take the bait when they try to provoke you. And that silence of yours, it screams louder than 1,000 arguments, because for the first time, your power is not in your words. It's in your restraint. You've mastered the art of not giving them what they crave, your emotional surrender. It wasn't easy to get here. You were conditioned to react, conditioned to defend yourself, to explain yourself, to prove your innocence. You were trained to believe that silence meant guilt and reaction meant love. But you've unlearned the madness. You've walked through fire to understand this truth. Not everything deserves your energy, and some battles are won by walking away, not by engaging. Your non-reaction isn't weakness. It's power on full display, because now you understand the game. You've seen the loop. They trigger, you explode, they soothe, you stay, over and over. But now the cycle is broken, and that terrifies them, because what they once controlled with ease now falls flat. They throw the hook, and you just watch it sink. You've become emotionally unavailable for manipulation. Not numb, not cold, just wise. You've stopped explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You don't need to raise your voice, you've raised your standards. And that shift in energy is deafening to someone who fed off your chaos. They might call you distant, detached, cold. That's fine, let them. Because they used to feed off the warmth of your breakdowns. Now your silence starves them. You've reprogrammed yourself to understand that peace is your new default, not panic, not drama. Peace, and peace to a narcissist is poison. You used to absorb their words like they were gospel. Every insult would echo in your head for days. Every sarcastic jab would spin in your heart like a dagger. Now you filter it all. You've realized their triggers say more about them than they ever said about you. And that realization, that is emotional mastery. They want to see you sweat. They want See you panic, they want to see you spiral, that was their addiction. Your reaction, but now you meet their chaos with calm, their fire with water, their storm with stillness, because you've outgrown the battlefield. You're not fighting anymore. You're walking away from the war. You don't even correct their lies anymore. That's a huge shift, because once upon a time, you'd fight tooth and nail to prove your truth. You'd exhaust yourself trying to be seen, to be understood. But now you know. People who want to believe lies will never accept your truth. And people who value your truth don't need an explanation. You've built a new version of yourself, stronger, quieter, more deliberate. You no longer respond on reflex, you respond with wisdom, and sometimes that wisdom means no response at all. You're not ignoring them, you're honoring yourself. You're protecting your energy from emotional vampires who only show up to drain you. They hate it, make no mistake. They hate that their power over you has expired. They'll escalate, they'll try harder, louder, crueler, but none of it sticks anymore. Because once your peace becomes your priority, nothing, not even their madness, can shake you from your center. You've become grounded, rooted, unshakable. You've stopped being the reactor and started being the observer. That's evolution. You watch their games with detachment, not because you don't care, but because you care too much about yourself to lose yourself in their toxicity. You understand now your nervous system deserves rest, not constant reactivation. You've become a fortress, not a wall. A fortress, solid, safe, still. You're not closed off. You're just no longer wide open to destruction. Your soul is no longer available for emotional warfare. And that energy, that level of calm, that infuriates them because they didn't expect you to rise. They expected you to fall, but you didn't fall. You rose. And when you rose, you brought with you something they never counted on: discipline. Not just emotional intelligence, but emotional discipline. You've become the calm in the chaos, the eye of the storm, and that's where your power lies now. Not in your reaction, but in your refusal to hand it away. You choose purpose over pain. There's a pivotal moment in your journey when you wake up and realize, I can't live like this anymore, not another minute, not another day, not another heartbreak caused by the same predictable patterns. That's the turning point. The second you stop choosing pain, and you start choosing purpose, because pain is what they handed you, but purpose is what you're taking back. They wanted you stuck in your suffering. Understand that. They wanted you frozen in a loop of rumination, shame, and guilt, because the longer you stayed focused on what they did to you, the longer they controlled your narrative. But now you're writing a new chapter, and they're not the author anymore. You are. With a pen made of fire and a voice forged in the furnace of your healing. You don't deny the pain. You don't pretend it didn't happen. You felt it deeply. You bled. You broke. You cried. But you didn't stay there. And that is the moment everything changed, because you discovered that your pain, while real, didn't have to define your future. It could refine your future. You realized you could turn your wound into a weapon of growth. See, pain demands attention, but purpose demands transformation. Pain says, sit here and suffer. Purpose says, stand up and rise. And the moment you stop recycling the trauma and start rebuilding your mission, you become untouchable to the very forces that once tried to destroy you. You stop being a victim of your story and become the visionary of your destiny. They never expected that. They thought the damage was permanent. They thought you'd stay shattered. But here's what they didn't count on. You didn't just survive, you converted. You turned that betrayal into fuel. You turned your tears into power. And now you walk with a clarity that only comes from having lost everything and deciding to build anyway. You've taken your energy back. That energy that used to go into arguing, explaining, reacting. Now it goes into creating. Now it goes into purpose, into meaning, into impact. You're no longer distracted by their drama because you're too focused on your destiny. And when someone steps into their destiny, the narcissist's grip slips. Purpose makes you immune to their chaos. It gives you vision, it gives you focus, and a focused mind is a dangerous mind for anyone who once fed off your confusion, because you no longer walk around dazed and disoriented. You walk with intention, with direction, with a reason. You're not just healing. You're leading. You're not just recovering. You're rising. You don't need revenge. Your success is the revenge. Your peace is the punishment. Your growth is the proof. You no longer need to shout, "I'm over it." You simply live like it never broke you, and that drives them mad, because they didn't expect you to bounce back better. They expected you to crawl, not fly, but you are flying now. Purpose gave you wings. You are using what broke you to break barriers. You're taking what was meant to bury you and using it to build a platform. You're no longer trying to get even. You're too busy elevating, and when you elevate, you change the game, not just for you, but for everyone watching you, and people are watching. Don't think they aren't. You're showing others what it means to come out of a narcissistic nightmare and still smile with authenticity, still walk in faith, still believe in yourself, still choose light. You're proving that the comeback is always stronger than the setback when it's built on purpose. Every morning you wake up and don't fall back into the old patterns. That's purpose. Every time you say no to toxicity and yes to peace, that's purpose. Every time you choose to invest in your future instead of ruminating on your past, that's purpose. And the more you choose it, the more unstoppable you become. You used to wake up asking, "Why did they do this to me?" Now you wake up asking, "How can I use what happened to help someone else?" That's the shift from pain to purpose, from victim to visionary, from wounded to warrior. It's not about forgetting what happened. It's about redeeming it, and make no mistake, your purpose is not small. It was birthed in fire. You earned it. Every scar you carry is sacred. Every lesson you learned is priceless. You're not just surviving narcissistic abuse. You're rewriting the script. You're ending generational patterns. You're choosing purpose in a world that profits off your pain. And that makes you revolutionary. So now, when the narcissist sees you, they don't see a broken soul anymore. They see a purpose-driven powerhouse, and they know the truth even if they never admit it. You've outgrown their cage, and you're never stepping back inside. Because once you've tasted the freedom that comes from purpose, pain loses its power forever. You become unrecognizable to them. There comes a moment so powerful, so raw, that it shakes the very foundation of the narcissist's delusion. That moment is when they look at you, and they no longer recognize the person standing in front of them, because the version of you they controlled, manipulated, guilt-tripped, and gaslit. That version is gone, dead, buried, and in its place stands someone they never saw coming, the real you, the awakened you, the unstoppable you. To them, you were predictable. You had a pattern. They knew what you'd say. They knew how you'd react. They knew how to make you crumble, how to guilt you into silence, how to twist your reality until you didn't know who you were anymore. But now, it's like speaking to a stranger. Because you've changed on such a deep level, they can't access you anymore. Not emotionally, not spiritually, not mentally. Your eyes don't carry the same pain. Your voice no longer trembles. Your energy has shifted from fragility to fire. You stand differently, you speak differently, you walk with a calm power, a steady confidence that radiates from within. You're no longer scanning the room for their approval. You're not hoping they validate you. You finally realized you don't need their recognition to be real, and that change, it's not surface level, it's soul, deep. You've gone through a death and resurrection. The old you, the one who begged for their love, who tolerated the disrespect, who second-guessed yourself constantly, that version had to die so this new you could be born. And make no mistake, they feel it. Deep in their gut, they feel your transformation, and it terrifies them. You used to revolve around them like a satellite orbiting a toxic sun. Your mood depended on their words. Your self-worth rose and fell based on how they treated you, but now you've broken free from that gravitational pull. You are your own center now. You are rooted in your own truth. You don't need their light. You found your own. They try the same tactics. They throw the same bait, but it no longer lands. It bounces off your boundaries like pebbles on steel. They accuse you of being cold, detached, unfeeling, not because you are, but because you no longer dance to their dysfunction. You've learned the power of neutrality, and to them, that's betrayal, because your silence is louder than your screams ever were. When you were in their grip, they saw you as weak, as naive, as dependent, but now you're a mirror. And when they look into your eyes, they're forced to confront their own emptiness. You've stopped playing the game. You've stopped feeding the illusion. And when someone thrives on illusions, reality becomes their worst enemy. You're not reactive anymore. You're reflective. You've turned inward. You've healed in silence. You've rebuilt from the ground up. And that internal work, that's what made you unrecognizable. You didn't just change your habits. You changed your identity. You stopped showing up as who they expected and started showing up as who you were created to be. They'll try to provoke you. They'll test you. They'll throw shade, lies, even nostalgia, but it all falls flat because you've severed the emotional cord, you've closed the chapter, you've turned the page, and what's on the next page? It's written by you, for you, about you. You're not a side character in their story anymore. You're the author of your own, and here's the truth they'll never say out loud. They miss the old you, the wounded you, the easy, to control you, but that version doesn't live here anymore, and no matter how many masks they wear or how many games they play, they can't pull you back into that storm. Because you've become the storm, calm, powerful, unshakable. You are a walking contradiction to their lies. They said you'd never leave, you did. They said you'd never heal, you are. They said you were nothing without them. You became everything because you walked away. You're not just surviving, you're thriving, and every breath you take without their control is a declaration of freedom. They don't know how to categorize you anymore. They can't put you back in the box they built for you. You don't fit in their narrative. You don't play your role anymore. You've rewritten your entire script. And that script doesn't include their abuse, their drama, or their approval. It only includes your truth, your peace, and your purpose. You didn't just level up. You ascended, emotionally, spiritually, energetically. You operate on a new frequency, and that frequency isn't accessible to people still playing games. You've raised your vibration, and anyone not aligned with that elevation simply can't hold space in your new world. They stare at you now like a ghost, like someone they used to know, because who you are today was forged in fire, born from pain and built with purpose. You don't owe them an explanation. You don't owe them access. You don't owe them closure. Your growth is the closure. Your freedom is the finale. So when they look at you now, confused, bitter, threatened, it's because they finally understand the truth. They lost you, not when you walked away, but when you changed. Because when you evolve, truly evolve, the narcissist loses their power, not just over your life, but over your mind, your soul, your spirit. You've become unrecognizable. And that's exactly how you win. This is the beginning of your unstoppable life. There comes a time when you stop looking back and you start rising. This is that time. You didn't just endure the narcissist's manipulation. You didn't just survive the confusion, the gaslighting, the betrayal. You evolved through it. You rebirthed yourself through it. You stared the darkest part of your story in the face, and you didn't blink, and that changes everything. You've walked through the fire they lit to destroy you, and you emerged forged, not broken. You're not the same person who cried yourself to sleep. You're not the same soul who begged for basic decency. You've become something far more powerful, aware, awakened, and aligned with your truth. And that truth, it's your liberation, it's your light, it's the very thing the narcissist tried to bury, but failed. Now they see it, they feel it. That shift in your energy, it speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. You've disconnected from their drama and reconnected with your divinity. You've dropped the weight of proving your worth to people who never saw it. You've finally realized you are enough as you are. You were always enough. This is the moment they lose, and you win, not because you played their game better, but because you stopped playing altogether. You chose yourself. You chose your healing. You chose your life. And every choice you now make is no longer filtered through fear. It's filtered through freedom, through power, through purpose, and they can't reach you anymore, not where you've gone, because the healed version of you vibrates at a frequency their manipulation can't touch. You don't flinch. You don't chase. You don't explain. You simply exist in peace. That peace is your revolution. That silence is your roar. That transformation, it's your final word. So let them look confused. Let them wonder how you did it. Let them regret what they lost. That's not your business anymore. Your business now is becoming, creating, living, loving yourself with a depth they never could. Building a future that would have never been possible had you stayed. You owe that to yourself, and you're already doing it. This isn't just your comeback. This is your arrival, the arrival of the version of you that doesn't settle, doesn't shrink, doesn't apologize for being powerful, passionate, and free. You didn't change to spite the narcissist. You changed to resurrect the truth that had been buried beneath years of conditioning. And that truth is walking tall now. You were never broken, you were buried. But you grew roots underground, and now you're rising like a force of nature. Unstoppable. Undeniable, unrecognizable, not because you lost yourself, but because you finally found yourself. And from this point forward, there is no going back. There is only forward, there is only expansion. So let this be the day you no longer explain your growth. You just live it. You no longer argue with the past, you outgrow it. You no longer beg for validation, you embody your worth. The narcissist may never admit your power, but the world is about to witness it, loud, clear, unapologetically. You've done the hardest thing a human can do. You changed in the face of destruction. You chose love in the face of hate. You chose to rebuild when you had every reason to collapse. And now you walk forward carrying the most powerful truth of all. They don't define you, you define you, and that is the moment you become untouchable. Now go, live as the person they never wanted you to become. World is waiting.